A lot has already been spoken about justice and how it is conducive to bring about peace. Since morning, I was listening to the wonderful speakers ahead of me who are NGOs, activists, who get into the world and make a change in the world. I have no clue why am I put along with them. Because I'm a theorist. Vithalji speaks, he shows actions which I want to speak. Yes, without ideas, you can't act. The ideas are there. Yesterday over the dinner table, we were speaking about how we catch the ideas and nurture in our brains. A lot has to be spoken about that, but that is not our topic. So, the topic, that is how peace is to be brought through justice, has been addressed from a general philosophical perspective by Professor Sabhat, Dr. C.L. Ramakrishnan, and Dr. K.S. Radhakrishnan as well. I'll continue in that tradition because I'm professionally a philosopher and fill up probably the missing links to give you a complete picture as to how this problem, namely justice bringing peace along, has been addressed by philosophy in general and Indian philosophy in particular. In Indian philosophy, Prayojana Vichara is something very significant. As you start in any discursive thinking, you first inquire about the Prayojana Vichara. Why should we undertake such a task? So now here, we are going to Prayojanam Anudishya Mandobina Pravartate. Even a fool wouldn't take upon an action without thinking what the use of that indeed is. So here, evidently the Prayojana is how we can bring about peace via justice. That seems to be the task that we have at hand. Now, this can be achieved, according to me. I'm trying to analyze the whole problem by undertaking three procedures, progressive 3 steps that we need to undertake. First, we need to analyze what justice indeed is. Unless we know, see, if you ask me to fetch some water, unless I know what water is, how will I fetch it? So, first we will have to define what justice is. We are all under the impression, quite like knowledge. I am an epistemologist by profession. So, we all think that we are pretty familiar with what knowledge is. But as you enter into the problem of knowledge, we know how elusive it is. Pretty like that, we have the problem of justice as well. First, we need to have a good analysis of justice, define it, and second, once we have definition of it, how we can bring about it, how we can achieve it, or the methods of achieving it. It's quite like, again, knowledge. First you define knowledge, give a good analysis of knowledge, then what are the sources of getting knowledge, like perception, inference, verbal testimony, and so on and so forth. And the third, quite again, like in epistemological exercise, you have the skeptic challenges. Can we have knowledge at all? Because there are people like, to take an Indian example, Nagarjuna, or to take Western examples, David Hume and Robert Nozick, to speak about the current skeptics. We have series of skeptics, starting from Greek times onwards, who have questioned the very possibility of knowledge. Similarly, in the case of justice as well. So, can we have justice at all is the skeptic challenge that we will have to address as well. That would be the third concern. So, my presentation would be navigated something like this. First, a quick analysis on what justice indeed is, where the emphasis would be the interrelation between justice and truth. I presume that you cannot address the problem of justice without parallelly addressing the problem of truth as well. So, I'll speak about that. And second, as I have said, how to bring about justice, and third, to attend the skeptic challenges. So, let me go to my analysis. It's a very quick and quick paper because I know that it is pretty late in the evening and I don't want to test your patience as well. So what is just after all? There are various Western definitions available. The current and mostly favored definition is that of John Rawls, who has defined justice as fairness. Very simple definition, justice as fairness. But I like the Socratic definition better. For Socrates, justice is more important because all other goods, all other finities flow from it. That is what he says in Republic 4, where he says, Socrates explains that justice is enacted by people when the three parts of the human psyche, what are the three parts? The appetite, the reason, and the spirit. All these three are in perfect harmony. When you have the perfect harmony between appetite, the three faculties, the appetite, the sensational, the rational, and the spiritual, then you have a harmony, and this alone can bring in justice. This is what Socrates has said. So this harmony is a state in which reason controls appetite, and both are being controlled by the spirit, where the spirit functions as a charioteer controlling the two horses of the spirit, the rational and the sensational faculties. But I'll stop with the Western analysis because I have something very original to speak from the Indian position. So I'll stay and look for a native response, or what we call lakshana. In Indian philosophy, definition is called lakshana. Lakshana from the Indian position. In India, the concept of justice at the social level has been talked at length in the Niti Shastras, the Dharma Sutras, and the Upavedas. But in all these instances, we resort to the law, the normative ethics, at the formal level, where we are trying to implement justice forcefully by law in the society. But this approach to impose the law to bring about justice is smeared with problems, as well, very well shown in the morning, as well as subsequently, of course, they were NGOs, so they were not getting into the theoretical aspect. But then most of them who have spoken in the morning, particularly those who spoke from the philosophical angle, have very well shown that this normative ethics can barely bring about justice in the society. So this dubiety about the normative ethics takes us to the metaphysical square. Sir Owen Dixon once made to a woman at a dinner party, in response to her observation, she was praising his enactment of justice, and she was saying how wonderful it was to dispense justice, and to her, either cynically or in exasperation, Dixon said, "Excuse me, all lawyers here." He says, "I do not have anything to do with justice, madam. I sit on a court of appeal where none of the facts are known. 1/3 of the facts are excluded by normal frailty and memory, 1/3 by the negligence of the profession, and the remaining third by the archaic laws of evidence." And this is what happens with regard to the law. So the general consensus, by and large, seems that justice cannot be brought by merely imposing law. In other words, the normative ethics has never seen success. The Indian method, so now I'm not making radical statements regarding the uselessness of, please don't read into things into that, but what I'm trying to impose is about the significance of metaphysics and how metaphysics enrolls ethics into it. So the Indian method in its original format is to roll up all ethical principles in its metaphysics. By grasping the nature of reality, what is metaphysics? Whatever that is beyond physics, that is which speaks about that science. Metaphysics or ontology is that science which speaks about the problem or the nature of reality. So by grasping the nature of reality, one will get to know the nature of truth. And truth will lead you to knowledge, and knowledge to right action, and right action to peace. Now, I don't have to speak about justice here. Once the peace is in place, naturally there will be justice. So reality is known as truth. Now, there is an integral in Indian philosophy we say samavaya sambandha, inherent relation between truth and justice, as well as reality and truth. Very often ancient Indians as well as Greek philosophers used to identify truth and reality. If you read ancient Greek philosophy, very often they use these two terms, reality/truth. They have been considered as synonyms, but today we don't do that. But there is a slight difference. I'm not getting into the philosophical discussion whether reality and truth can be synonyms or not. That's a larger philosophical problem. But just let me tell you this much, that what is reality and what is truth? How do you distinguish it? Reality, when targeted by an individual, well, there is reality. Presume that reality is something. Say, go with Bauddhas, and then you say that reality is Shunya, or go with Advaitins, you say that reality is Brahman. Whatever be the status of reality, when human beings address it, it becomes the problem of truth. So, you have reality, and when a human knowing agent targets it, it becomes the problem of truth, the same entity in fact. But when it becomes subjected to a human cognition, it becomes truth. And truth, when attained by humans, become knowledge. And right knowledge, when attained, leads one to right action. Indeed, Dindaga, great philosopher of the logical school of Buddhism of the 5th century AD, says, right knowledge is that which leads you to purposive action, because knowledge is meant for action. So right knowledge, when attained, leads one to right action, which leads to the well-being of the individual and thereby the society. Now, nobody speaks about the well-being of the society. Well, let me tell you this, I am speaking. So, right action, from reality, you spoke about truth, from truth to knowledge, from knowledge to right action, and then right action to the well-being of the individual, and there ends the matter. And then the peace in the society is a natural byproduct of that. So in this way, truth, reality, truth, knowledge, and right action form 4 quarters of a rectangle, all being interconnected, and justice or well-being of the individual. And through that, now you might wonder, well, how can you speak about the justice of the individual? I'll quickly come to that. So the well-being of the individual, keep justice for a while aside. The well-being of the individual at least stays at the center place of this rectangle. Now let's come to the second problem. How can we attain justice? The problem of justice involves the problem of the other. Now, where is this other? The general notion on justice indicates that it is something which the self gives to the other. As you know, throughout, and particularly in the afternoon discussion, we get this feeling that justice is something that Professor Vijayji should get from me. So it is something that I should give to the other. Now, this is wrong. Justice is not something one, be it an individual or an agency, gives to the other. It is something that happens normally with the spiritual expansion of the self. The result of this might be enjoyed by the other, but the focus is always the self. It is the self whose spiritual expansion that has been addressed in the text, and by that very performance, the other is being benefited. While speaking about the concept of yajna, last time I did speak about the spiritual, by performing the yajna, I am coming to that also. By performing the yajna, you have a dual benefit. The primary beneficiary is indeed the individual, because he has the primary benefit, that is the metaphysical benefit. But the other, Vithalji, will get the material benefit of that, which is lower in status when compared to the metaphysical benefit. So, the spiritual expansion of the individual and the justice that falls in place, by which there are material benefits being given to the other, is indeed lower in status when compared to the metaphysical benefit that I get. So this is how things fall in place. So you have a dual benefit by this spiritual progress. So the result of this might be enjoyed by the other, but the focus is always the self. In this lonely travel of an individual, to get redeemed from the ignorance, redeemed from the phenomenal world, the other comes in only incidentally, but sufficiently to maintain peace at the societal level. The other comes only incidentally. The focus is on it. This has been criticized since the time of Indologists. Early Indologists were accused that, look at in Indian philosophy, we don't have the problem of the other being addressed. There is no ethics here. There is no epistemology here. So this is all self-centered philosophy. But little they realize that this is the perfect way to bring in ethics. By bringing in, when I say to Dr. C.L. Ramakrishnan that you ought to do it, the minute that I say that you ought to do it, there is a primary tendency in him not to do it. So these oughts have never survived much. But when the ethics naturally blooms out from the awareness of the truth, things are different. Things take a different color. So in this lonely travel of an individual to get redeemed, the other comes only incidentally, but sufficiently to maintain peace at the societal level. I'll explain. We speak of the rights of the other in the Constitution. Look at your Constitution. See, in younger days, I have studied the civic sciences only during my 11th or 12th standard, where I was taught about the rights and the duties. And these days, particularly in the postmodern era, all the intellectuals think that it is our prime duty to focus on the rights rather than on the duties. And we are gravely mistaken. Though the Constitution speaks about both the rights and the duties, a glance at our classical text would reveal that duties are primary. They define your beingness and your station in life. I am a grihastha means where I am being placed in the life. And being placed in a particular life, while there are so many better things, like I can serve patients in the hospital, it's a very fine way of serving the society, but then my primary duty is something else. Who will do that? If I don't teach my students and my children at home, who will do that particular duty? This is precisely the topic of Bhagavad Gita. So the duties are primary, and they define your beingness and station. My station and its duties broadly. I have already told you this, I think, in the previous conference. When Human Rights Declaration was made in UNESCO, Gandhi asked his mother, what do you think of human rights? And then his mother, illiterate mother, said, child, there is nothing called human rights. There are only human duties. So when you have human duties in place, when I do my duties, you don't have to ask for your rights. So this focus and the awareness on the duties, again, as I have said, serve you dual purpose. I am redeemed from my phenomenal being, and then you get all the material benefits. So duties implicate rights, and the emphasis therefore should be on duties, so that we don't have to speak about the rights at all. When a student of mine stands and tells me that I have this right, note that I am a failure, I have missed out my duties, or there is something wrong in between, right? So in fact, to speak about the rights goes against the nature itself. Just look at the nature. Someone was speaking, I think K.S. Radhakrishnan. Look at the nature. Is any entity in the nature speaks about their rights? Every entity seems to be busy performing their duties. Nobody speaks about their rights, barring human beings, and human beings only recently. So, in fact, to speak about rights goes against the very culture or the very principle of nature. The nature seems to be working constantly, and everything in nature seems to be pretty well aware of its duty, engrossed in fulfilling its duties, and that seems to be the very principle by which we can define the nature. And as I have said, this is the principle of yajna, which has been spoken at length by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita. One of the prime principles that he has spoken. If you take the sum and substance of Bhagavad Gita, one of the principles is this principle of yajna, where he says, perform your duties as yajna. That is the fine way of acting. Yajnardhad karmanonyatra lokoyam karma bandhanaha. Because you have been anyway tied up with karmas, and every being or entity seems busy performing yajna. He says, look at the whole world, everything seems to be performing yajna. Sarvam yajne pradishtita. The very principle of the cosmos itself is rooted in the principle of yajna. Hence the call is to perform actions as if you are performing an yajna, an ahudi to the Lord. And this is, friends, metaphysics and not ethics. This is the metaphysics because you will have to perform actions as yajnas for a set of metaphysical reasons. What are these metaphysical reasons? The individual being, the jiva, thrown into this world of karma. There is no Sartrean either or. Either I can perform actions or I can sit quietly. Krishna very beautifully says that there is no option for you. You will have to perform karma. So having given this ought that you will have to perform karma, you have no escape from it. Hence the right way of doing it, how to perform it in the right fashion, is by, so that you can get back to your original home, is by performing them as yajna. And these, and thereby it will become non-binding, so that you don't further create vasanas and you will eventually get released. So this non-binding karmas will eventually release you from the vasanas and rescue you from the cycle of birth. Hence my theory. This I have been repeating unashamedly in several platforms, that ethics is a derivation of metaphysics, which is the first philosophy. So in India, metaphysics is the first philosophy. Be it ethics or aesthetics, they are sub-disciplines getting rolled, roles. Something has been packed inside. So ethics and aesthetics are things which packed up along with metaphysics. One who is aware of the nature of reality has no way out other than behaving in such a fashion as I have already said. One who is aware of the nature of reality will strive to realize the reality, and this will automatically straighten his weird ways of behaving in the world. As Sureshwara in Naishkarmya Siddhi has said, that he was talking about the nature of the Jivan Mukta, and he says, where is the place for dirt in a burning fire? Just as there is no place for dirt in burning fire, so too, with regard to Jivan Mukta, he doesn't need any ethical discourses. He is naturally ethical. I am reminded of an example, an anecdote of Sri Ramana Maharshi. As he was climbing the Arunachala hill, he picked up a little lamb, wounded, and up the hill he dropped it. And then Saman, one of the disciples, said, "Oh Maharshi, you've been very compassionate to the little lamb." And then he said, "Oh, it was so very natural to him, like breathing. Like you are not aware that, okay, today is a fine day, so let me do some good karmas." And you start doing it. That's not the case. It becomes so very natural, and you don't have to wait till you become Jivan Mukta. All through the way, it becomes natural adaptation to this. Another example is, the principle of Karuna. The Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha, the four principles, I forget, it's called something in Buddhism. So this principle of Karuna, it is not compassion. It is not at all compassion. The Karuna, for instance, in Malayalam, there is a great poet called Kumaranashan. He has written a beautiful poem called Karuna, where he speaks about the Upagupta, the Buddhist bhikshu, and Vasavadatta, prostitute. Vasavadatta, being enchanted by the figure of Upagupta, calls him, and he said, ask him to come up. He says, no, this is not the time, I'll come later. And once Vasavadatta becomes ill and she was thrown on the road, Upagupta comes to her. And then he says, this is the time. This is the time that I have said, I promised you that I'll come. Then she says, why did you come? I said, I have come. This is the right time for you. And why is it that, now don't think that Upagupta was compassionate to her. Compassion is not the word. Actually, by making this quick English translations, we are losing all the essence that is enrolled with the metaphysics. He realizes the nature of Vasavadatta because he knows that she is not to be accused. He knows the nature of reality. He knows the pratitya samutpannatva of reality. The Buddha's metaphysical principle that he has a particular approach towards Vasavadatta. So this is what I am trying to impress you. So the collection of metaphysical principles, that is the nature of the origination of things, the nature of momentariness, and the non-substantivity of things, all this have made Upagupta to adopt this particular approach towards Vasavadatta. So in brief, justice will be imparted to the society when people act being led by their right awareness on the nature of reality. This is how knowledge comes to play a great role in bringing justice. Right knowledge, as I have already said, will lead to efficacious and purposive actions. Now the last concerns, that is the skeptic challenges. Can we have justice at all being implemented? Or why should we prioritize justice over a cluster of other values like, say, freedom, truth, etc. Now often people, particularly in the postmodern world, say that freedom should supersede all other virtues. As Sartre would have famously said, freedom is the pioneer since, I will close. Freedom is the pioneer since unless the individual can respond to the either or, Sartre, the existentialists, say that you have the either or. And unless you are free, you can respond ideally to the ethical situation, authentically. This is what is called an authentic response. One cannot be held responsible for our actions either in that case. So the value of freedom thus takes precedence over all other virtues. Of course, Sartre was right, I agree, but Indian philosophy goes a step ahead. Indian philosophy, across all traditions, maintained that freedom comes from within the awareness of the reality and with the practice to control the vrittis who spoke about, Dr. Ramakrishnan spoke about the chitta vritti dirodha. The story of Angulimala, you know that. Angulimala asked Buddha to stop. Then Buddha continues walking, and then Angulimala says, didn't you hear? Are you deaf? I asked you to stop and take another route. Then Buddha says, no, I am not traveling. You are the one who is traveling. By traveling, he meant the vrittis of the chitta. That is the travel that he meant. So from this awareness of the nature of reality as pure consciousness and about the nature of the material world as phenomenal, you plan your journey. And once you set your journey towards your final goal of realizing the nature of the self, things fall in place. So this goal will set the path as well as the goal where peace and tranquility will be spread around the spiritual aspirant, and justice will be seen as one byproduct of this great exercise. As Jiddu Krishnamurti has famously said, violence arises in the individual. When there is incoherence in the doxas meaning beliefs. When you have incoherent beliefs, you are doing violence to yourself. You lose your own self. I speak something to her, and then I think something else, and I do certain other things. Then I lose a coherent personality to myself, and this is the beginning of the violence. And it is this violence which is shown in the external world. In the morning, Swamiji was speaking about how by deceiving others, you deceive yourself, and the self-deception that takes place. So the takeaway lesson is that self is the most valuable entity. As Yajnavalkya said in Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, that it is Navare Patihu Kamaya Pati Priyo Bhavati Atmanastu Kamaya Pati Priyo Bhavati. You love yourself. I see this bottle not for the interest of the bottle. As there is a flesh of cognition, I can also see myself. And it is this desire to see the self that promotes me to look or have the cognition of this bottle. Otherwise, who is interested in the world? No individual is interested in the world. Everybody is interested or trying to catch the self. And the longer duration that you can catch the self, we normal beings, we do not have other means to catch the self, and therefore we resort to the phenomenal methods like perception. So let me sum up. Peace in oneself is the single source for the peace in the society. When there is restfulness, as someone was saying about Ramakrishna sir was saying about Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So when there is, by repeating Shanti, Shanti, you will not get Shanti, but you will have to act for it. First realize it, then set on to, as Dinaga says, set on to action, plan it, and take care of yourself, and the whole society will be taken care of. Thank you very much.